Thank you very much. And so we go on to the last panel of this assembly to this time. And now the last, going from history and politics, culture and self-determination, conflict and diplomacy, we now go to the most important aspect of the work that means a great deal, I'm sure, to all of us, and that is solidarity and transdemocracy. So that is what we will focus on in this panel. Now, when we talk about solidarity and transdemocracy, for the past 2 days, we've been hearing about this concept of democratic confederalism. I just want to say a little bit about my own introduction to that concept and my understanding of that concept, if you like. When I first came across the idea of the concept of democratic confederalism, from Abdullah Öcalan's works, I was absolutely astonished. I was astonished because the last time I should say, not the first time, that we as people from the South Asian continent heard about or talked about democratic confederalism was during our freedom struggle in 1900s. And at that time, we had a movement called the Gadar movement, and Gadar in Urdu means revolt or rebellion. And the Gadar movement was the first or the last time we heard about the use of the term democratic confederalism. And it's extremely fascinating. Of course, after that, the Indian freedom struggle was taken over by the Gandhis and the Nehrus and whatever, and it went to a very state-centered, very capitalistic kind of model of development, etc., etc. And the British said the Gadar movement were terrorists. The Indian history writers said the Gadar movement were idealists. They may be good people, but it was not practical, and we needed the kind of state that we got in the end. So for the last 70 years, the words democratic confederalism went out of our vocabulary, our political vocabulary and our dictionaries. So when I read Abdullah Öcalan's work and said, oh, democratic confederalism, after 70 years, that thought has come back to us, I'm saying. And that is very interesting, because that makes me wonder, perhaps when we need certain things, for example, when we were struggling for freedom, that idea comes out of those struggles. So I just wanted to say that. But last 2 days, when we have been talking about diplomacy and all of those and talking about solidarity, the Gadar movement also placed a lot of importance on solidarity. Initially, they started off in about 1905, 1910, they started off thinking about solidarity as, traditional state-based solidarities. They thought that enemy's enemy will be our friend. So they thought Britain's enemy at that time was Turkey in the First World War context. Britain's enemy was Germany. Britain's enemy was Japan. Britain's enemy was Italy. And they thought that by going to these capitals, by going to the Turkish government, by going to the German government and saying, please help us against the British, they will be able to establish a kind of geopolitical reality. But one of the things they discovered very quickly in that process was states don't operate like that. So, although Turkey had a problem with Britain, although Germany had a problem with Britain, none of them helped them. And that forced them to think about alternate models of solidarity and on what it should be based. And they developed a whole coalition or alliances with a wide range of freedom struggles, including the freedom movements in Egypt, freedom movements in Malaysia, freedom movements in... So wherever the British Empire ruled, they formed solidarities with all those movements. And they actually opened embassies, what we call offices in Shiraz, in Baghdad, in various, in Kuala Lumpur, in Singapore, in so many other places. And that was perhaps the first kind of example of global solidarity of all people struggling for freedom and independence. So when we talk about international diplomacy and embassies, I am reminded of our embassies in Shiraz, in Baghdad, in Cairo, in Hong Kong, in Kuala Lumpur, in Kenya, in all those places where they actually established that kind of thing. But one of the things that came out of that idea was that the freedom of all, the freedom of one can only be achieved through the freedom of all. So if they said, if India wants to be independent, then it is important that the Egyptians are independent, the Malaysians are independent, the Kenyans are independent. And if they want the free, and the word independence is perhaps a mistranslation because the word azadi means freedom, not so much independence. So if India has to be azad or in freedom, then everybody else has to be free. Now, why am I saying this? I'm not saying this to kind of give you a history lesson on India, nor am I saying this to kind of fly the flag for India. But the reason why I'm saying this is 3 points. One is that our history is absolutely essential for us to go forward. And I think Öcalan makes this point time and time again. Without history, we go nowhere. The second point that related to that, who writes our histories? Because our histories, unfortunately, are written by people who are either victors in the wars. Our histories are written by scholars in Oxford and Cambridge and Harvard and Stanford and wherever. Our histories are written elsewhere. And we then have to learn about ourselves from what others have written about us. So I think one of the most important solidarity projects for us is actually to write our own histories of our own struggles. And I think that is something that is a condition for ours going forward. And lastly, I want to say that perhaps I've been listening to this discussion on democratic confederalism, and it seems to me that there is some kind of a struggle in articulating this concept. Because when I read the Gadar literature, it falls into place, because they said, what kind of Azad Hindustan do we want? And they said, we don't want the Mustafa Kemal Pasha model, because it's not going to work for India. Because India is a we know it has all the religions, all the cultures, all the languages, and so on. So they said we should have a federation of qoms. Now the word qom there's no English equivalent for that. Because the word qom can be translated as nation, but it's not quite nation. It can be translated as people with a common history, not quite. There is really no word for it. But it does denote a group of people with a history, but who don't necessarily, it's not essentialist, who are not unchanging, who are not essentialist. And qoms can be with a watan, which is land, homeland, or Qawms can be without a watan. So the whole Gadar concept of Hindustan as a federation of Qawms with a shared watan seems perfect sense to me. And it just speaks to me in a way that is so simple. And then I hear this discussion about what stateless democracy, how can it be, what can it be? And suddenly a concept that sounds so natural when we say it in our language, a federation of Qawms with a shared watan, is a very appealing concept. Becomes so complicated when we have to say it in English, when we have to say and translate those concepts into this kind of thing. And that is why I think one of the things we perhaps need to think about is how we translate concepts from one culture to another culture when we talk about these issues. But on that introductory note, I will stop here and then call our first keynote speaker for today, which is Salih Muslim. And Salih is somebody our friends in Britain have been telling me I should meet for a long time, so I'm very pleased to meet you in this context. Salih is the elected co-chair of the Democratic Union Party, PYD, of Rojava since 2010. He is one of the founding members of the PYD in 2003, and the Assad regime regarded the party as a threat because it could mobilize discontent and therefore regularly prosecuted its members before the start of the Rojava Revolution in 2012. Currently, PYD is the largest political party of Rojava and plays an important role within the democratic self-administration and the movement of a democratic society, or TEVDEM, and we heard the representative speak in the morning. The umbrella movement for revolutionary parties and civil society organizations in Rojava. And Salih, I know, is an ambassador par excellence. He goes from capital to capital, pleading the cause of Rojava and the revolution and the people, and we have a great deal to learn from him. So may I ask you, Salih, to come and address us.
Well, thank you very much for calling me. It's fair. And I would like to thank all the people who done the efforts to collect us all together in this area and to give us the opportunity to talk to the people and valuable people listening to us, and especially for the municipal of the Oslo, Mr. Mariana. I thank her also to collect all these miserable people, I mean all together, the Kurdish people, Azawad people, Amazighs, Samis, so all of them, this is the big solidarity, I mean to be here, all of us. So it's a good opportunity really to know these people and to talk to those nice people who are listening to us, and valuable you also. I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Would you like to actually throw open the subject by telling us your thoughts on solidarity and transdemocracy, and perhaps your own work on trying to promote both of these things, solidarity and transdemocracy?
Well, our Kurdish people, and even we are talking about the components in Rojava as a Syrians, and even our components living with us, really we were ignored, and nobody knew that there are Kurdish in Rojava. They knew there are Kurds in Bashur, in KRG, and Kurds in the north. Some of them are terrorists. Some of them are living, with no need to anything, but nobody knew that there are Kurdish people in Rojava, and also the components. So when we just defended us, and we showed that we are a thing in our land, and we had solidarity among ourselves, first of all, as the Kurdish people and the components, and then everybody was with us. What I mean by this, everybody should know you, who are you and what you are doing, and then they can decide to be in solidarity with you or not. But if you are ignorant and you have enemies like Turkey, which is trying to cover everything and even change the history, and just to close the eyes and the ears of the nations, nobody will knew that you are you are there to have any solidarity with you. So this is what happened in Rojava. We are a party as a PYD. Of course, we know the history of our area, we know our people, and there was a long struggle for changing the mentality, to persuade our people to trust themselves, to be confident of themselves. And then we started, we had a kind of project for our party, PYD, since 2007, that, according to the lessons we have, taken from the history, we should have a democratic self-administration. The aim of us is to create the people which they are free in their mind and free in their will, so they can decide what to do freely and implement what they have decided. So this is the most important thing, because the mentality of the maybe in the Middle East before that, it was maybe because of some religious beliefs and because of some one nation states. So they made a kind of slaves. They never been free in their will and their thinking. So our aim was to create individuals with the free will and free thinking. And of course, when you have a free people, you can organize yourself. And we organized our people. And then, of course, when the Syrian Revolution came in 2011, by the way, in some percentage, our people were ready. They knew how to move, how to do. And that was the result, because we could organize our people. And when we were organized and we defended ourselves, we started, around us, the people and the others, because as I mentioned, the people over there, we have seen the Amazighs, we have seen Samis, we have seen Aswad, and everybody in solidarity with us. But how they do know? So we improve that we are here. Everybody should know us, what we are aiming for, what we are calling for. And then the solidarity will come. And other than that, the solidarity can be with the people who clearly know what they are looking for. Our people, what we are, we had a lines, which could not be passed. For example, we said we are looking for democracy. We are looking for freedom. Those were our priorities. And for our society, we didn't look for some other things. The freedom and democracy, and of course, some stable, which is principles. We cannot move according to that at the beginning. So we were very clear, looking for democracy, looking for freedom and we were secular according to our principles. And if you have your principles first, and if you have organized people, and then you can do everything you like. You can maybe, because those are very strategical points, I mean, to have your goal, what you are looking for. Our goals were to have a democratic nation, for example, democratic nation for all the people. A democratic nation could be in the states, and democratic confederalism for the nations also. So this is from our principles. And when we approved that we are very honest with what we are calling for, our aims, at that time, we had the support from all the pro-democracy forces over all the world. So they were supporting us, they were beside us. Also those people I have talked about, I mean from the Amazighs, from Samis, whatever they heard, they found how much we are tied to our goals, how much we are struggling, how much we are free. And even for the states we are in, I mean from the Syrians in Syria, from the Turkey, from Iraq, from the other, locally also, we have all those pro-democracy organizations. We have pro-human democracy, humanitarian, I mean values, supporting the humanitarian values. All of them, they were beside us because they found how much we are genuine for what we are calling for. So I think the matter is to be honest for yourself, to have your principles very clear, and you have your target. Your target should be clear to everybody to know what you are calling for. Until now, we are, since 2011 till now, we didn't move from our line. We are still calling for the freedom for all the nations, the equality, maybe for all the nations, for gender equality, and our aims is very clear and accepted by everybody. So because of that, we are getting this solidarity from all the movements and even the sides, the parties who believe in these principles, they are with us. So I think maybe some other sides, they are not so clear. Maybe you are calling but just for freedom for one nation, or for one person, or for one maybe party, or so. It's not so clear, not so us. And even if they call it, maybe they are not serious for defending these principles. But what we have approved, we are very serious, and we are ready, and maybe thousands of martyrs, which they are already in the struggling till now, approves that we are right to do it. And even we have international support also. Today we have a news among our martyrs, one American and I think one German, also friends, were martyred today fighting against those brutals. So it means we have not only supporting us, solidarity by only saying or supporting us politically and maybe diplomatically, also in the struggle, in the battlefield, we have friends internationally defending us. They are with us in the same trench against those brutals. And those, we have such a solidarity because the enemies which we are fighting, they are enemies for all the world, for all the humanity. They are enemies for all the humanitarian values. So because of that, our position is good. Of course, I mean, with this solidarity, we are proud to have such solidarity with us, defending, maybe we are defending ourselves, but at the same time, we are defending the humanitarian values. So this is the most important for us, and we are, I mean, hope to widen this solidarity, to be together, and of course, I think the solidarity of the people and the pro-democracy, pro-humanitarian values forces, they will succeed and they will get the victory. Now the other point for transdemocracy. Now this is an important point also for us because If we say democracy, we are meaning democracy is very wide meaning, but what we have implemented in our areas and in our party and our people, it's grassroots democracy. Grassroots democracy, it means everybody can share in this, establishing this democracy. Everybody can be active in it. When you choose the people, I mean, I said, free people with the free will and the free power, they are able to implement what they have decided. So this is the democracy. If you make the organization believe in this grassroots democracy, so this is the most important thing. And we are not doing it for the Kurdish people and for all the society. And one of them is this gender equality. I mean, the persons in the society should feel free to be able to give what they want, to do what they want. So this is the freedom and democracy all together. So this grassroots democracy, I think, if we say democracy is not a value you can give it to the other, it's a kind of culture. So maybe it will need the mentalities to be changed. And now we are talking about the area called Middle East, which is, we have a lot of cultural, I mean, from the belief-wise, religious and the others, and even ethnically we have a very traditional and very old, maybe the first society of the humanity was there since 5,000 years ago. So it means we have traditional things. And all this is, depends on the slaveness. Even, I mean, the religious, we are a slave to the God. So if they accept to be a slave for somebody and accept to be slave for the God, it means he accept the slave to be slaves. This is different. Now what we are saying, I mean, the people should be free. They shouldn't accept any kind of slaveness. They should be free for our thinking and even for the mentality. So this is the important point we are doing it. I mean, to have freedom, to be able to express themselves. And it's not only for the Kurdish people, of course. It's for all the nations. And we believe we have, due to our work and our struggle in our society, since as a party we have been established in 2003, but there was a struggle even before that, we could change some mentality of our people. But that's not enough. We have to change the mentality of our neighbors too. Because if you have a neighbor who doesn't believe in democracy and living together, he will attack you. So you have to change his mentality also. And changing the mentality is a very difficult job. Maybe you can keep somebody in the room, you can kill him, you can tie him, you can punish him. But changing his mentality, you should be very patient, you need a long time. So this is our job, what we are doing. Maybe since, as a party, from the beginning, we were trying to change our mentality of the people. And the result, we can see now, we have changed the mentality of our people because they are accepting the democracy, living together, and even democratic nation is acceptable by our people. But we believe it's not enough because we are living with maybe Arabs, Persian, Turks, Muslims, Durzis, Christians. So also these mentalities should be accepting, I mean, to live with each other. Now, I cannot live with a Muslim considering the killing the people will take him to heavens, which is my Yazidi brother. He is Kurd. He is Kurdish, I mean, the Yazidis. How can I live with a Muslim who believes that the killing of Yazidis will take him to heavens? It's not acceptable to us. So what I should do, I should change the mentality to this Muslim, to tell him he is wrong. I mean, this kind of thinking is wrong. So this is needed time and need to be patient. So now we are working on that. And of course, I mean, we believe defending democratic values, humanitarian values, is not only by weapon, it's not by killing or killing somebody or to be killed. It also depends on the changing the mentality. And this is the biggest job and the hardest job. We are after it. Until now we have succeeded. There is no other way for the people, especially in the area like Middle East, to live together if they don't change their mentality. As a party, as a society, as our institutions, we all believe in this job. Changing the mentality should be implemented. Otherwise, we have to kill each other maybe for many decades also. So this is the way, and of course, I mean, we are talking about the solidarity we have mentioned, and the democracy, transdemocracy, is this way. I mean, the free people can implement the democracy, can believe in democracy, and the changing the mentality is a guarantee for all the people to live together within the democratic values. And thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you, Salih, for that setting out the meaning of solidarity and about solidarity that is based on truth, on knowledge, on justice. And I mean, these are very, very big ideas and very fundamental wherever you are and whoever you may be. I just want to just get you to maybe respond a little bit to, you know, yesterday Bassam Ishaq, he said that for thousands of years we lived together. There was no problem, the Syriacs, the Muslims, the Arabs, you know, whatever. And I can say that about our continent. For thousands of years we lived together without, you know, any problems. And everybody had their own identity, mind you. We didn't have any assimilation. The Hindus were Hindus, the Shias were Shias, the Sunnis were Sunnis. There was no assimilation, but everybody, there was no thing. So my question to you is, why has this suddenly become such a big issue amongst all of us? I mean, we have not been Shias from just yesterday or after 9/11. People were Shias from, I don't know, when the Battle of Karbala took place and whatever happened, and people have lived since then. Why have these things suddenly taken on this extraordinary seriousness to the point that now we have to defend a way of life which has been part of us for centuries? So I don't know if you can just comment a little bit on your thoughts on this question.
Well, as I mentioned, I mean, the people when living together, maybe the priority of things were changed. I mean, before maybe the Islam was something new. I mean, everybody accepted in the Middle East to be Islam. But they never thought of the slaveness because it was tradition. We are talking about the humanity and progressive humanity. It means things should change. And especially in 21st century, all the world is became a small village. I mean, everything happened in this area. So it happens maybe after 15 minutes. You can hear everywhere, wherever you are in the world. So it means they know each other, and the connecting also, the connection and the, I mean to the people, and so they are taking from each other, and the same for the culture. Maybe in Pharaoh time, after, I mean before 3,000 years, if you, in the slaves society, maybe if you have talked about the freedom, everybody will laugh to you. Because those people, those slaves, they were just thinking of, they were hungry, there were no way to be slaves working in somebody to get food only to live. So they never thought of the freedom. They never thought of nations. And we are talking now of the disasters in the 20th century and 21st century in the Middle East especially is coming from this one nation state. Because we had, states, everybody, especially, the bourgeois, they wanted to make their own states, for their trades, for their benefits and so on. They never care about the people, how they are going to live. And because of that, they were fighting each other. And because of that, we find now in Arabic, we are talking about one nation states, but for the Arabs, we have 22 nation states. All of them are Arabs. It means just belonging to one nation is not enough to make one state. So, and they were fighting between each other just because there were benefits. So this is, this causing fighting in the Middle East, which is one nation state, and maybe it was for time in Europe also because we had the First World War, the Second World War. It was the reason was also the nation state, establishing the nation states. And before the French Revolution, there was nobody thinking of the nation states. You see, there's something. If you are talking about the progressing the mentality of the human, so it's changed from time to time. So they have to modify. A nation state was something new, started with the French Revolution. And in Europe, this caused many problems. When it wasn't convenient for the Middle East nature also, so it had problems. So we have lived, all the 20th century, fighting each other, killing each other, just to draw the border. This is my border and this is your border. And at the same time, in Europe, they tried to remove this border which was drawn by blood. At the same time, we were fighting each other maybe in the Middle East. So it depends on this progress. And now I think the time came for the Middle East to pass this period. How Europe could pass this by removing these borders, by unifying, European Union, and they are taking more steps, to remove this border. So this time is came for Middle East too. Maybe could be a few years later and so on, but at the future will be a democratic confederalism, as you mentioned, maybe for southeast of Asia. And in Middle East, it should be valid. Otherwise, we have to kill each other.
I hope we don't kill each other, but the thing is, your point is, I think, a very important one, that the state becomes an instrument for benefits of particular groups, and so they start fighting over the state because it's only by capturing the state that they can advance their economic or financial interests or profits or property or whatever. And we see this everywhere, really, and we are seeing this in many forms across the world. Salih, I would like to ask you many, many more questions, but we have 3 other panelists, so I would like to invite them now and maybe join this conversation. I would like to invite Kate Baird. Kate, are you here? Oh, yeah, there you are. Kate is based in international advocacy for local governments. She is part of the coordination team and international committee for Barcelona en Comú. Is that right? Okay. Which is a citizens platform currently governing the city of Barcelona. Kate has written on Catalan and Spanish politics for Novara Media, Red Pepper, Open Democracy, Indie Voices, and other papers. So, Kate, welcome to this panel. The next person I would like to invite is Despina Kotsumba. Yeah. Kotsumba, thank you. Despina is an archaeologist and a member of the region of Attica Council of the Front of Greek Anti-Capitalist Left, or Anthracia. She campaigns against the austerity measures that have been forced upon Greece by the Troika, as well as and the economic capitalization on historical monuments following the Greek debt crisis. So welcome, Despina, to this panel. And then I would like to invite Lorenzo. Where are you, Lorenzo? Yeah, there. Marsili. Lorenzo is one of the initiators of DM25 and the co-founder of European Alternatives. He is also the initiator and current spokesperson of the European Initiative for Media Pluralism, which is an international campaign demanding better protection for media pluralism and freedom at European level. He has worked in setting up the Trans-Europea Festival and was founding editor of Naked Punch magazine. He is also a philosopher, sociologist, as expert in China studies, and initiated multi-year arts exchange programs between cultural innovators in China, Brazil, Europe, called Transnational Dialogues. Wow. And lastly...
You increased it a bit in your presentation.
Wow. Lastly, Catherine Mendes. Catherine Mendes, yes. Catherine is member of Malmö City Council for Feminist Initiative. She is, F is a feminist political party in Sweden, formed in 2005, that holds seats in many municipalities in Sweden as well as in European Parliament. The party takes a feminist approach to a variety of political and social issues and emphasizes the importance of gender equality and solidarity with minorities and refugees, as well as the importance of a feminist ecology. Mendes traveled to Rojava in 2015 as part of an international delegation organized by the Democratic Self-Administration and the New World Summit. So welcome, Catherine. Okay, now we have heard Salih speak about the meaning of solidarity. We have also heard him speak about the democratic self-administration, the need for solidarity to be based on truth and principles and goals. So you have very clear goals, very clear principles, and you speak the truth to people. And he also said about people have to know what you stand for. And when people know what you stand for, then people make up their decisions and people have an opportunity. Am I right? Yeah? I hope I'm summarizing you correctly. So our job as solidarity workers is to put across very clearly what we stand for and give people the opportunity then to decide the kind of positions they may want to take about us. So in the light of that, if I want to be in solidarity with each one of you, can you tell us, in turn, what do you stand for? What is the one thing that you would want people to know about you and be in solidarity with you on that basis? Yeah, what is the basis for our solidarity? So what kind of work do you do in a nutshell? And, what would you want to tell people? Why should people support your work?
Thank you. Wow, that's a big question. So for those of you who don't know, Barcelona in Común is the platform that is currently governing in minority Barcelona City Hall. It was set up in 2014 by lots of activists from the city who felt that they'd reached a limit of what they could do outside of the institutions. So we decided to stand for election. And in 2015, we won the election, as did many similar platforms across the rest of the Spanish state. So I think it's interesting that the decision to stand for the local elections wasn't ideological. We considered standing for the general elections, for the Spanish elections, and it was actually a pragmatic decision. But I think time has shown that actually municipalism as a tool is very powerful when you have two goals which we share with the Kurdish people, which are grassroots democracy and the feminization of politics, because I think it's at the local level where you can really start to put into practice those values. So my plea for solidarity would be to support municipalism, decentralization, and local autonomy.
Thank you. Thank you, Kate, for that. So you can see that there is a big hand for municipalism and democracy, local autonomy, and that concept obviously resonates with a lot of people here. But I'm also reminded of, as we are in Norway and speaking in Oslo, we shouldn't forget the Norwegians in this. And I think it was the AKP which in the late 70s or 80s actually made a decision that they would work only at the municipal level and not really get into parliamentary politics. And quite successfully, but their reasons for that was very clear. They said that they wanted to do that because they could be most effective when they are working at municipal levels. So I just thought I would throw that in because we are in Norway and we shouldn't forget our hosts, if you like, and their history. So thank you for that. Going on to Lorenzo. Lorenzo, what would, I mean, you are coming from a very different standpoint, or anyway, I'll let you speak on what you stand for.
Right. Something interesting about solidarity. Closer, right. I think they've just increased it. Something interesting about solidarity is that it's another way of conceptualizing the construction of a people beyond the traditional ethnocentric or state-centric understanding of a people. Gramsci, the Italian Marxist theorist, used to say that a people does not precede its mobilization. That is to say, a people emerges through the emergence of joint struggles that construct a network of solidarity amongst individualities. And that is that very precious moment when solidarity with the other becomes equivalent to solidarity with yourself. And you understand that by standing in solidarity with the other, you're at the same time in solidarity with your own struggles and your own interests, and there is a commonality that binds you together, and that commonality constructs a people, oftentimes well beyond national or ethnic lines. I think the kind of solidarity that we're looking at today when we speak about Rojava is of this kind. It is not only an inspiration for Europe, what you're doing. I think it is part of the solution to many of the problems that we are experiencing these years. As you know, the little democracy that was left within the state, the nation-state dimension, has been eroding over the last years, has been eroded from within through corruption, through neoliberalism, financial capitalism, inequality, and has been eroded from above. Technocracy, the European Union, financial flows. The result of this emptying out of democracy from the national state in a European context is that more and more people feel pushed at the margins of society. They feel disenfranchised, marginalized, and the answer, the solution that is being offered to them today is more and more that of nationalism. Chauvinistic, patriarchal nationalism. The nationalism of Le Pen, the nationalism of Farage, the nationalism that is very close to a new postmodern version of the fascism of the 1930s. And that's something that unfortunately we see as a growing trend and a growing tendency in Europe today. The answer that we can give to this cannot be a return to the status quo of our nation states that have been emptied out of the type of real democracy that will be necessary to return hope and belief in our communities, but it's something much closer to the democratic confederalism practiced by Rojava. And to conclude by saying that one of the things that I'm working for is to try and open up a third space between the status quo of our failed European nation states, the nationalist option that reconstructs community through an exclusionary practice. As Le Pen very clearly says all the time in France, it's the country of white French men. It is not the country for ethnic minorities, for religious minorities, or even for other sexual orientations. And instead, between those two, opening up a third space, which has to be based on grassroots democracy, has to be based on the empowerment of local processes, on the empowerment of autonomies, and the federation of those autonomies through a network that goes beyond the borders of the nation states as they exist today in the European Union. So a federalism that goes high up towards the European level and down towards the very local grassroots and neighborhood level. And that is why Rojava is an inspiration and also a solution. And standing in solidarity with Rojava also means standing in solidarity with a part of Europe that does not want this continent to go back to what it was in the 1930s.
Thank you. Thank you. We have heard municipal governance and grassroots municipal solidarity at that level of people across countries, where it is people's solidarity, where we are most in touch with people. We have heard of the third, opening up a third space that is not, caught between the state and the hollowed out democracy. I would now like to move to Despina on my left. And what would you tell people, following what Salih said? We should tell people what we are doing so that people can make a decision about us. So what would you like to tell us so that we will want to work with you in solidarity?
First of all, I will begin from where Lorenzo stopped. I was asked the same question in Germany, in Berlin in 2011. German employees asked me what we as Greek employees wanted them to do in solidarity to us. And I told them, we want you to fight for your own rights. Because if German employees have rights, Greek employees will have rights. If German employees have no rights, Greek employees will have no rights. And it's the same to Chinese employees and everything. So Antarcia is fighting against neoliberal politics and austerity. We are fighting against war and imperialism. We are fighting against the European Union and its politics, against fascism, and we're trying to fight for a new type of base root organization of the people, direct democracy, and the needs of the social majority. This is what we are fighting in our country. And we are fighting more hard since 2010, since the IMF politics were imposed in Greece. But Rojava means to us many things, not only as solidarity, but as what we fight for the same ideals and the same goals. We fight independence. Rojava fights for independence. That means against imperialistic imposing, which is something that all people should fight against. You are fighting about democracy, direct democracy, from people to the people, which is also something we have to fight everywhere. And you are really fighting about revolution, that capitalism is not, and its cruelty is not the only way for humanity. These are our vision. These are our ideals. This is what we are fighting for in our country. And since our countries are very near and have relationships that come, I'm an archaeologist, we have, all Mediterranean countries have a relationship, and the countries around Mediterranean. That comes from the antiquity. I want to remind you something. Greece and Spain and other countries lived the Indignados movement, it was called in Spain, the square movements, it was called in Greece. But how did it started? We owe to Tunisia, Egypt, Libya, the movement for real democracy. We owe the movement of the squares. And if we owe to Tunisia, Egypt, and Libya, we owe to Rojava that the demands about real democracy and the organization of the people can become true. This is what we owe, and this is what solidarity is, to my opinion.
Okay, thank you. And now I move on to Catherine, and who comes from a feminist party, and a party, so it is a political party that is feminist. I would like to just ask you what you want people to know about your movement and your organization. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I would like to begin by saying that we also believe in solidarity through awareness, and we actually started as a folkbildning, people's education movement to raise awareness about human rights, feminism, for instance, which is treated much like an opinion in Sweden instead of being addressed with the statistics and how it actually looks like. And we also emphasize the problematic power relation in the nation state, which Rojava also addresses, which we find very complicated because it's on behalf of the woman who is the first colonization, as you say also, and that's why we need to be free, and we need to question the nation state's control and domination over our bodies, the earth, through territories and so, and also the masculinization of the nation, which stretches the use of violence. And this is our next step. We advocate anti-militarism also, and therefore I also like the way that Rojava has organized the People's Defense Movement, because it's actually, as I see it, at least my interpretation, a very feministic way of self-defense, because it has the declared aim to dismantle itself and to address this very problematic patriarchal violent structures that are and instead create a feministic, non-violent, stateless democracy, which we also stretch for. And this was an eye-opener for me also when I went to Rojava, because the awareness, for me at least, I didn't know about the revolution in Rojava, but it gave me, I took with me the notion that there is an alternative to the nation state. So I'm very inspired, and I feel very privileged to be able to have seen how you organize yourselves. And the next thing that we also do is that we base all our politics on human rights as your social contract as well, because this is the next step in how to solidarize globally, because if we don't raise awareness about human rights are for everyone and not based on citizenship, then we won't be able to find new ways of working with the so-called today developing countries which have had to stand back because of colonialism, etc., etc. So these are like what we stretch. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. I think all of you have, kind of pointed out how Rojava has been an inspiration for all of you. But Catherine, I want to ask you a much more specific question, which is, you say that the feminist initiative is a feminist political party formed in Sweden. And my question to you is, how is your feminist party? Everybody talks about feminism, yeah? And it's been around for a long time now. And so how is your feminist initiative and your feminism different from, say, the feminisms that the law talks about and the feminism that has gone in the past? How is it different?
Good question. Hello, you hear me? Okay, good question. It stretches. One thing that we do that I believe that it's not being done or addressed is that we emphasize not only women's gender equality, but equality for all people, all people's rights actually. And we are an intersectional party, which means that we take into consideration how different power structures interact with each other and sustain one another also. And first of all, since when we started, we didn't have the ambition to go to the political arena. We saw us as an educational movement to raise awareness just about how power interacts and suppresses and oppresses different people in different structures, intersections. And that's one of the things. And also that we are activists foremost. I see myself more as an activist than a politician because I bring the grassroots into the city council, for instance. There is no feministic initiative without the grassroots. And I can't say how important it also is that we actually stretch the human rights perspective because it's lacking. Like in Sweden, we have the refugee situation, the people seeking asylum, and this is because in Sweden we have had for a long time structural rights in the law, and we have to have equality and gender equality, and this we have like 4 goals and everything, but awareness in what happens in our everyday life, like how we live, how do we reproduce, patriarchy and everything. You ask me how we do it differently. We're here educating, and through activism and through keeping our ear to the ground, that's how we operate.
By listening.
I don't know if that was the answer.
By listening,
yeah.
Yes. But what I took away from that is this is a kind of, in a sense, broadening of the old feminism, because if you're anti-war and if you are anti, then it means that feminism is no longer about women's rights, but it is about all humanity, because
Exactly.
War and peace are issues that are not just, it is about future generations, it is about men, it is about our brothers, our sons, all of those things as well. So thank you for that, and that broadening of the feminist understanding of these things. I just thought I would come back to you, Kate, and ask you to just comment on why you think working at municipal levels takes on such a priority, and why you prioritize working with at municipal levels. Why is that important?
Well, first of all, because we have been able to win, which is really important. So partly it's a demographic question. So in cities, you tend to have more young people, more cultural diversity, more progressive politics. I think it's an interesting contrast in the Spanish state between the municipal movement and then in parallel at the same time Podemos, which took a different strategy, what they called the assault on the skies, which was a strategy of going straight for the state government, a bit like Syriza, trying to win the state and then make the change. So you win and then you change things. They didn't win, so that's the first problem, is that... but even if they had, I think Greece shows that the limits of the state, you think all of the power is in the state government, but it's not necessarily. And I think if you really want to implement radical democracy, feminize politics, start to really make an impact in people's daily life through concrete objectives and small victories, achievable goals, then I think it's a very good place to start. I mean, it also has its limits. In Barcelona, we have an immigrant detention center, which the city wants to close, the Catalan government wants to close, but the Spanish state controls it and wants to keep it open. So there's a lot of issues like that where we have limits, but we are making progress, and I think that's the important thing, is to show that there are alternatives through action, and I think the municipal level is very good for that.
Thank you for that. Now, Salih, if I can come back to you, and you have heard all of them speak about what an inspiration Rojava has been for them in rethinking their own situation in Greece or Barcelona, or, Sweden or wherever. When you hear them speak like this, I want to ask you two questions on that. First of all, how does it make you feel? Secondly, what did you do to win the hearts and minds of so many people? How did you actually go about it? Can you give us a lesson in solidarity?
Yes. Well, of course, I feel... Yes, of course, I feel happy when I see the same ideas, the same, but I would like to say it in this way. During our struggle and even fighting on the ground and even maybe the peaceful struggle in our society, what we have said, we are defending the humanitarian values. Humanitarian values, it means those values is not only for the Kurdish people, it's for all the humanity. So these values, they are correct in Spain, they are correct in Italy, they are correct in Greece, they are correct in Sweden, and wherever there is a humanity, there are humanitarian values. So if somebody is protecting these values and defending them, and even by weapons, so I think it should be supported, because all those people, they are tied to the humanitarian values. It means they are defending themselves, defending their values. So we are sharing in these humanitarian values, and because of that, we feel all those people defending the humanitarian values, they are with us, because maybe they found the genuine side which is defending these humanitarian values in the right way. Because of that, we get this support, and these people are with us, and is a source for our, of course, power, and we feel better. We feel that we are not alone. We are all together for defending these humanitarian values, and we are very happy about that. But the problem is, they discovered, this discovery came very late. To discover the people, and Kurdish people, and their struggle, and they should know the real sides who are actually trying to destroy these humanitarian values, because we are talking about Daesh. We are talking about the same mentalities, maybe Jabhat al-Nusra or the other organizations. But as everybody knows, especially our friends here, they know the mentality of a Daesh member is belong to 2,000 years ago. So, but what he is using is very modified weapons, very sophisticated weapons. It means they don't have factories to produce such weapons. If somebody is supporting them. So those who are supporting them, using those brutals as maybe proxies to implement their gains, those should be stopped. And now, in the reality, what we have seen, maybe the first time, and Daesh was defeated in Kobani, and then was defeated in somewhere else. And what happened? The actual actors behind them, supporting them, they were enforced to invade these places which Daesh was taking. So those are supporting, and those should be actually, warned, or even maybe they should be struggle. We should have kind of struggle against them, like Saudis, like Qataris, like the others. Turkey is doing so. So the reality is, those are tools used by somebody else, attacking the humanitarian values, destroying everything, and we are maybe defeating them. And all our people, which they are in solidarity with us, they should maybe do what they can do against those sides who are using those brutals as tools in their hand. So what we are expecting, because we believe maybe Turkey wouldn't do so if it's not supported, if Turkey is not a member of NATO, he wouldn't do it. So it means you get their weapon from the NATO. And we know they wouldn't do it if they don't get financing from them. So there are countries are financing this terrorism, which is Qataris and Saudis. And even Turkey is getting support from Europe. So we should find the ways who to cut this help to those brutals, which we are fighting against. And the rest, what I can to say, well, it's what we are doing in Rojava is experiment. And this experiment is not only for the Kurds, it's for all the humanity. Because it's, to have such implementation of democracy and human values and so, in Rojava, it's a really good experience. It's experiment, and we should succeed in it. And this succession is needed from everybody, all the humanity, because we need the succeed of the experiment in Rojava. It will be succeeding. It will be victory for all the humanity, I think. Because of that, we should all be serious in one hand to support this experiment to get succeeded. So this is, it's my idea. Thank you.
Yeah, it is important to bear in mind that it is an experiment, and experiments succeed only when everyone pushes for the success. But at the same time, I think the other thing is also true, that if if Rojava succeeds, then others also can succeed, because then there is hope. But if it fails, it will be held up, and for many, it is going to take many, many, many years to actually come back and build up that. So I think it's quite an important historical juncture. The Rojava's success depends on support from others. The others' success depends on Rojava's success as well. So, there is a mutuality in that. But I want to pick up on this point on humanitarian values. And Lorenzo, you talked about hollowing out of democracy, and how that has really frustrated, disillusioned people, and perhaps people are looking for other alternatives, and this experiment resonates with them. Now, the question I want to ask, you talked about hollowing out of democracy, the state-based democracy. At the same time, we have seen sharp rise in humanitarian discourse, humanitarian law, everybody is humanitarian. NATO is humanitarian, the drone attacks are humanitarian, everything is humanitarian. And at the same time, we have here a person who's working on the ground saying, this is a struggle for humanitarian values. So there is a big, sharp divide between the rhetoric and the discourse and the reality of that. Now, I was wondering if you can comment on the extent to which this rhetoric and the absence of the reality has contributed to a disillusionment with the European democracy and European models of democracy? I mean, would that be, what would your reaction be? Because, as I said, there is a rhetoric. Everything is, we have international humanitarian law, which we didn't have 20 years ago. So with the bombings come the humanitarian law. So, how do you see that playing a role in this sense of disillusionment?
Yeah, I mean, power has always lied, and this is one such instance. I think power is essentially conquered and maintained through lies and mass deception, and what we have witnessed over the last 10, 15 years is just such an example. Before I get back to that, let me just say one thing, that Rojava is not just an example or a theoretical inspiration, but it is also practiced. In the city of Naples, for example, they have local assemblies that are directly mirrored on the assemblies that you have in Rojava. So it is an experiment that is already seeding within the European context, and this is important to be recognized, also to make sure that people understand the centrality of the experiment of Rojava. And when we speak about solidarity, awareness is important, solidarity, intellectual solidarity is important, but also practical solidarity is important. And I think this connects me to your question. On the one hand, I think we need to devise better structures of being useful to you. So earlier today we were discussing about the exclusion of Rojava from the Geneva peace talks, for instance. That is a kind of situation where it is not going to solve it, obviously, probably would not have changed anything, but we should have organized for the mayor of Naples, the mayor of Barcelona, all this network that we have in Europe of people who think like us, who some are in power, in local governments, in regional governments, some are members of parliaments, of European and national parliaments, can stand up in moments where you think it's particularly useful to make a concerted pan-European action to say, look, Rojava is there, it is so important, and it needs to be given a seat at this table. That maybe will not happen, but... And this is one way in which you counteract this false rhetoric. It's by showing that it's false, and that there are other options that you advocate and practice on the ground. Then we also need to be, and I stop here, but we need to be very realistic on the role that we need to do in our own countries. There is the famous internationalist joke when Sartre went to Ho Chi Minh and said, how can we help you with the revolution? He said, go back in France and make the revolution there. So that's not, we should make a revolution also in Europe, but that's not the point that I wanted to make. We need to understand that precisely the points you were making go at the heart of our own political and social life. Europe is one of the largest arms exporters to the Gulf states and to Saudi Arabia. The weapon that goes there is eventually channeled into the conflict that is taking place in Syria. The financial flows between the European Union and countries that support indirectly Daesh are there for everybody to see. The relation of the European Union to Turkey and the blackmail that Europe got itself into because of the refugee deal with Turkey is one of the main hindrances to the European Union taking a strong stance on the constant violation of rights and also the indirect support to terrorism that Turkey is responsible for. So we need to understand that sometimes we need to act also exercising pressure for the foreign policy of our states, because that foreign policy is directly responsible for the situation we're looking at. So I think in order to counteract this rhetoric, two ways. We need to make solidarity concrete, concerted action, and then we need to go back home and make the revolution in our countries, or at least stop selling weapons to the Gulf states.
Despina, I want to just no, just on one thing, please. Comment on only one thing, and that is, you, Kate, all of you have emphasized on grassroots work, grassroots solidarity, building communities, and so on. But when you have parties like the Golden Dawn, also working on the grassroots, and also trying to disrupt the kind of work that you're doing, how do you manage the communities? Because we hear from the newspapers, that the Greek people don't want immigrants, that, Greek people, and that immigration is what is feeding Golden Dawn. But you seem to be saying something different. So I was just wondering if you could just comment on, the problems of working and the grassroots when there are these kind of groups like the Golden Dawn operating at the grassroots as well.
Of course, the problem of fascism is a threat in the whole Europe and the USA. But in Greece, we faced for the past, 16 months, we faced all this, I do not want to say refugees problem. We faced the goal for the Greek left to treat these people, to save these people, to save them from the boats, to feed them. This started in the summer of 2015. So thousands of people came across Greece and went to the whole Europe till March 2016, when the borders closed totally. If 2 years before, with the Golden Dawn at 7% in the election in 2012, you would tell me that thousands of immigrants would come, of refugees would come and cross Greece, or stay in Greece, because we have 60,000 people in Greece these days. I would be very, very frightened because of the percentage of the Golden Dawn in Greece. But what happened was not what I would imagine if you could tell me 2 years before. What happened was that Greek people, not only the left people, all Greek people, first of all in the islands and then in the mainland, they treated them like visitors. They treated them like humans. This started with fishermen, with Greek fishermen in the Aegean Sea, because they went out to fish to feed their kids, okay? And they found boats with kids in danger. So there you take a decision which is life or death. And they chose life. They chose to help these people. And the grandmothers in Skalasi Kamnias village in Mytilene, they went out of the houses and they treated the children like if they were their own grandchildren. This was a really, from the basis of the people, not exactly movement, treatment, tenderness. And the good thing was that the left people and solidarity movement, because we also had the social movement for treating Greek people that are poorless now, that are poor and that they have no electricity, have nothing to eat or things like that. So we had some solidarity for people movement that could feed poor people, that could take care of their health. So this movement also moved in refugees camps. So we were at least almost ready to do that. And this interfered too much. Of course, there are problems with fascists and Nazis and people that hear them, mostly in northern Greece. We had the problem with some schools. The parents of the schools did not want the refugees' children to go to their schools, even though they would go in the afternoon and not in the morning with the other students, because there were not enough space. But we faced that by surrounding these schools, people of solidarity, and welcome the kids. So if you are everywhere, if you don't let people do the Golden Dawn do that work, and you do this work, you can win. But our major problem was not really the Golden Dawn. Our major problem was our government, was Syriza government, that did not treat the refugees. That they still housed refugees in camps, even now in the winter, and this causes many, many problems to those refugees. They take money from the European Union and they don't treat them, they don't house them. They don't find houses for them, they don't give them the basic, and they give everything to NGOs. So if you don't have a public policy for the refugees, then the refugees camps may become a problem for the villages that are surrounding. So this is our main problem. And the second problem is that Golden Dawn has roots in police, which is a major problem. Yeah. I should also say that after the prosecution of Golden Dawn leadership, we have for a year now a trial which is going on, and this is something that helps us to speak about the real nature of Golden Dawn, that they are really killers. They are not just some ideology, or they are Nazis, they are killers, they're fascists, and they have to, we have to fight them in every place.
Okay, thank you for that, because I think that resonates, ties in very well with what Salih was saying. We fight for humanitarian values, but what you're saying is those humanitarian sentiments and feelings are there in human beings everywhere, and that is what we work on, which quite contradicts the neoliberal theory that we are all individuals and we are all working for our selfish interests. But those fishermen are probably living examples of the kind of humanitarianism that Salih wants to build the politics on. So on that note, I would just like to now invite questions from the audience. We will take a round of 3 questions at a time, and we will, if you want a particular panelist to respond, please say that, yeah?
Hello? Yes. The question is for Salih Muslim. My name is Shwana Ustadi. Could you say a few words about the tension between PYD and KDP and how this affects the political landscape of the Kurdistan? And the second question is the situation that bad between KRG and Rojava that the media shows?
Okay. Anyone else? Yes, here. Leo, no? Yeah.
Leo Gabriel. I have the 4 of you. I wonder why, and I include myself and the organizations we belong to, we are not capable, in spite of solidarity, grassroots organizing, and so on, to really launch a movement for peace in Syria. An anti-war movement, a peace movement of the dimension like it existed in 2003 against the war in Iraq, and so on. There must be something which prevents it. It prevents it. I know that, for instance, we were in Greece, that the government is not particularly interested in this issue. Why? What can we do in order to ferment a European-wide peace movement for Syria?
Thank you. Yeah, why is the anti-Iraq movements not repeating itself? The whole panel. So we'll get responses. Yes.
Thank you very much. I have a little right to have 1 minute question. Actually, has been so much mentioned about the redefining the concepts, especially by the panelists. The matter of radical democracy and redefining radical democracy is maybe one of the important issues as well. I'm trying to make a comment and making a question for Bares Salih Muslim in this respect. Radical democracy's definition, maybe to me, as I am part of the research in this respect, is make a work, make a mistake, correct yourself, and do another work, and make another mistake and still continue. So it's not going to be the end of the story. Always, to me, radical democracy, it means this. We have a notion of, for changing the values in the Rojava Revolution. The Rojava Revolution based on the changing the values of people, the name and faces. Because if the name and faces been changed, the same mentality will make us suffer again and again. I would like to say, to what extent this entity, which is, as like Aldar Khalil was saying, that is in a garden, in a minefield, with all difficulties we have, but we don't have to wait and be shy for having a criticism on this kind of great things happening there in order for us to develop it more. To what extent we are ready to have some criticism on the notion of democratic federalism or democratic autonomy in order for us to develop it, if it's needed to be developed, or if it's expired or maybe it's no good, we can proudly say, okay, this model is not going to be okay, we have to leave it and look for another alternative, as we have looked for alternative during the nation state after all discussions. Do you think this is enough way for us to criticize? To what extent we can be really achieve all this theoretical thinking about like commune and all these practices, but when you look at the ground and reality, we cannot see all this. To what extent you can criticize by yourself and look at it, and for some moment as a political activist there, come out and look at what is going on for the last 5 years, and some of the main actors there can at least write one kind of article, if it's not a book, to tell us some limitation through your own mouth, not through me as a researcher. I can see and I have criticized, or some others did, but through you as a political activist. Is there any criticism or anything is being done so far? I would like to see. Thank you.
Okay, so self-critique is what you... we'll take these 3 questions and then we will have a second round of questions. So hold on to your questions. So that is 3 for you and 1 for the rest of the panel. So take it away, Salih.
Well, before answering the questions, I have some word to say for the refugees and the Greeks also. I would like to say that everyone is immigrant or refugee going from our land. We consider it is a lose for us. They shouldn't go. They should stay in homeland. This is one. And those people, they are out, we know they are used as a blackmail for Europe. So maybe our friend just didn't say so. It's used as a blackmail. This is one. And another point is the regime powers, I mean in Syria, they tried to make an Arabic belt in the Kurdish areas since 1962. And they have done in some parts, but they didn't succeed in some other parts. And now what the Turkish government is trying to do, they are trying to build the Arabic belt around the Kurdish area, which they didn't succeed. I mean, the Syrian regime didn't succeed, and now the Turkish regime is trying to make this Arabic belt by those refugees. So those refugees, we know, is a tragedy, really. Is tragic problem, but they are using this tragedy as maybe tool for incoming from using them as a blackmail, which is should be, I think, condemned by everybody. So even against the Greeks, they are using as a blackmail. I mean, just yesterday, he said, well, we have millions, we can send them to Europe. So it means it's blackmailing very, very clearly. So this is one point. For the question, I mean, the relation between PYD and KDP, well, we, as a PYD, as a party of Rojava, we have relations with all Kurdistani parties, and only the relation is not okay with the KDP. The reason is because they are very pragmatic and tied to their economical beneficial with the Turkish regime, that's all. Otherwise, we have no problem with any Kurdish party. We are dealing with them very good. Yes, for the KRG and Rojava, of course, Rojava is, they have their administration, they have their governing system, and they have their structure, and KRG the same. I don't think they are, taking place of each other, and they should deal very good. And what happened, there is no problem between KRG and Rojava. Only the problem I mentioned, there is no acceptance by KDP to the administration of Rojava, because they find such a democratic model, such a structure, maybe it could be dangerous for their future, even because their mentality is the same. They are like a nation states. KDP is still the same mentality of the one nation states, and they are working for. And maybe they are finding this model, which is established in Rojava, is a danger for them. Because of that, they don't want to recognize, not recognizing only, they don't like to deal with them. And because of that, we have a siege, on the Rojava territory still now. Yeah, these were two questions. The third question about the system, as I mentioned, yes, as I said, is experiment, and experiment maybe we are not going, to try one. If it's failed, we are going to try the second one also. It's not like that. We have an experiment. We believe theoretically it's what's going on is right, and it is only the solution according to the lessons we can get from the history. So the grassroots democracy is only the solution. We are trying to do it. So maybe the mistakes we have is maybe for the implementing related to one person or one institution, and so this could be criticized and remain. So it's no problem. I think it wouldn't make change. So we are ready for any criticism, but we have a structure, we have rules, we have a council, we have maybe a social contract. So according what we have in hand, we can deal with each other, and any mistake could be remedied, could be repaired. So we have no problem for that at all. At the opposite of that, we are asking our friends, which they have experience in these fields, to recommend us what to do, to help us, because as I said, it's an experiment, and we have to succeed. Otherwise, we have no way. So because of that, we are asking the help. Anyone want to recommend us, to show us the right way, not to do the mistakes, we are ready to listen to them. And even maybe we are inviting the people and the experts to visit our areas to see what's going on the ground. If we have any wrong things, we are ready to correct it. Okay. So thank you. This is the question.
Okay, thank you. Now I'm just wondering if we can go around and comment on that very important question. Why is there no Europe-wide mass popular movement against the war in Syria? And why is, against Iraq war, there was a mass mobilization. Why has that not happened? So Despina, do you want to start on that?
Yes, I want to say something because we're trying hard to combine the refugee solidarity movement with the anti-war movement, because we strongly believe that what we need totally in the whole Mediterranean is an anti-war movement like the Iraqi one. You have to understand something which is, I think, difficult for you all because you know Syria. You have to understand what the average citizen of Europe knows about the war in Syria. Nothing. He cannot understand, he can understand that we need peace, but he cannot understand, it's not like the Americans attack Iraq. You have USA and Iraq. Now it's totally different. USA is involved. Putin is involved. We are not pro-Assad. They don't know anything about Rojava. They don't have someone to defend, to say, I am with him in the Syrian war. We need that. We need that people know about Rojava so that they demand peace for those people, not for Assad, not for FDA, But this is a major problem. It is a complicated, and something. I think that wars of new world, wars of this global economical crisis, are wars of new type. We now have in Syria something like 100 countries involved, but even the citizens of those countries do not know that their countries are involved because it's drones, it's just fighting from away. You never know. So we have we saw that even in Ukraine. Before Syria, we saw that in Greece, in Ukraine. Nobody could understand what was happening there. And it was easiest because from the one side we had fascists. But those fascists were on the streets with the European Union flags. So everybody was confused. We need information, and we need the Rojava example to persuade people that they need to fight about peace for the Syrian government, for the Syrian people. And I want to have one comment. We live in a global economical crisis, a global capitalistic crisis. I think we have to think about that. There is a key word for me, which is fear. It's fear. In a world of fear and terror, ISIS is a terror for the whole Europe. In that world, that people feel fear, fear provokes paternalistic government policies. You need a paternalistic, powerful government to protect you from ISIS, to protect you from fear, to protect you for something. And in this also, which poses all imperialistic politics, Rojava is the answer, because Rojava says you don't have to be afraid, you can face the fear, you can beat the fear, you don't need someone else to do the job for you. You can go on and do it yourself. And this is very important for all of us.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Now, can I turn to you, Katrine, and why do you think that we don't have mass mobilization? Very quickly.
Yes. I think that it's a very complex situation which doesn't have an easy answer. But if we look at, it's not only the peace and anti-militarism movement that is lacking, like the United Nations and trying to collect money for Syria, it's been tremendously difficult. I think that we have to bear in mind, this is your area actually, that since 2001 we have been having this war on terror, which has meant that some of us have been constantly, since 2001, dehumanized. So it's not raising the same kind of empathy to see this suffering in the Syrian people because they are the terrorists. I think that this has contributed also to the lack of mobilization. And also that Europe is in a crisis. We have to reconsider, we're many preoccupied in our own lives, struggling, and we don't have the energy like we had a couple of years ago because there are so many battles in so many different areas that we are addressing: the racism, the rise of fascism, etc., etc. So I think it's like a combination of many different factors that is enabling this movement that we wish to see.
Thank you for that. Kate, would you like to comment? No. Lorenzo, would you like to comment on that question?
Very briefly, because you've said everything that I wanted to say, and so there is but maybe just one point. I think it's of course we have the Iraq situation, but you will remember at the end of the 1990s how much the example of Chiapas and the Zapatista uprising resonated in Europe, for instance. So I think what we are witnessing over the last years as part of a retrenchment of globalization, which also means a retrenchment of the alter global or no global spirit of international solidarity, triggered by this sense of fear, is a retrenchment within our own borders and our own confines. And that is something that is very dangerous because it leads to, you know, the famous poem by Brecht, first they came for the Jews, I wasn't a Jew, so I didn't stand up. Then they came for the gypsies, I wasn't a gypsy, so I didn't stand up, so on and so forth. Then they came for me and there was no one left around to stand up. So I think that is and the second thing to add is that you mentioned changing mentalities. Changing mentalities is key, but it can also happen the other way around. And what I think we're witnessing over the last years is a normalization of the idea of conflict and violence also within the space of the European Union, as more and more conflicts approach and encroach the borders of the EU itself. And this is also an equally a very worrying trend because it normalizes or it opens up the possibility of seeing violence within the borders of the European Union in the next future.
Thank you for that. And I would have thought that at least the so-called refugee crisis should have woken up the Europeans to an interest in Syria, because the common sense is refugees come here because we bomb them. You know, I mean, it doesn't need great intelligence to figure that out. So if we stop bombing them, maybe Europe won't have a refugee crisis. But it's that loss of that common sense that we are kind of seeing here. But what I would like to do now is to invite Pancho Sanchez. Where are you? Yes, there you are. Pancho is from Podemos. And if you can, having followed as a Podemos person, followed this conversation that around the table, if you can just briefly summarize your reflections on what you took away from this discussion and how you respond to it.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, first of all, for inviting us to the New World Summit. First, I want to share a feeling I had here today, and it's the feeling that it's the same feeling I had when I was in the 15M movement in Spain, this movement that changed the political arena in Spain forever. And it's the idea that even if we don't know each other, even if we don't know, what we think about specific matters, we agree on what's important, that we are in the same boat, paddling to the same direction. And this is the feeling I had hearing the forces of change. At the same time, I think what we're facing here is the failure of the liberal state. We have to understand that we come from two traditions. We come from the liberal tradition that tells us about private property, that tells us about individualism, and we have the democratic tradition that tells us about equality and participation and popular sovereignty. Within the 19th and 20th century, we've seen how these two traditions have been contaminating each other, making democracy more liberal, making liberalism more democratic. And here we see how in this contamination, the elites, what we call in Spain the casta, had taken advantage of this contamination and had made politics something professional, something that is not for the people, something telling us basically, you people look somewhere else, that we take care of the politics. And in this situation, when we the people have looked somewhere else, the liberalism has eaten democracy. And it's in this situation that we see ourselves with the failure of the liberal state and with the failure of the project of the European Union, that I don't like to hear the concept of refugee crisis. It's not the refugee crisis, it's the crisis of the project of the European Union, of their values. And in this situation of crisis, we see hopeless people. We see people, the lower classes and the middle classes, that have no more hope, no more future. It's been mentioned here about the fascist movements. Well, here they have an open space. This fascist movement have an open space, and they're winning in terms of, we have to understand that we need to hegemonize the meaning of democracy. We cannot take these forces to take from us the social matters, the social issues. And an example of this is, for example, Marine Le Pen. She called the other day her campaign "In Name of People." Suddenly, they are the people. And we cannot let it happen. And at the same time, we think the solution to this, the alternative, and I'm going to end soon, is that we need to stop asking ourselves who we are. because it's in the who we are that we create difference. It's in the who we are that we divide ourselves. We need to start asking ourselves, where do we want to go? Because it's in the where we want to go that we find each other in the same boat. And I think what Rojava has made has been saying, okay, we're going to work together because we have clear that we want more social justice, that we want more feminism, that we want more equality. So it's in the where we want to go that we need to find each other. And it's part of what it was said about the Gramsci of uniting the struggles. And it's the same concept here. And to end, since we're in the Oslo Architecture Triennale, I would like to mention the words of Oscar Niemeyer. He was a great architect and thinker, and he said, architecture is my work, and I spent all my life drawing on a board, but I understood that what really matters in life is improving human beings. So I would like to thank the Rojava people for improving human beings. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for your contributions, and thank you, Poncho, for your intervention. I'm sure there are many, many more questions that people want to ask. Unfortunately, time is short, and we are getting to that point where people are starting to feel hungry, perhaps. And I'm afraid we will need to really bring this to a close now. My apologies to all those people who had your questions, but we have really run out of time. I want to just wrap this up very quickly by just reflecting on, not reflecting really, by just highlighting certain points that have come up both in the morning and this session, and want you to really take it away with you when you go. First point is, I hope in the yesterday and today, the 2 days, this place has been a training camp for ambassadors, if you like. So I hope every one of you in this room will go away with the task of becoming an ambassador for Rojava, for other struggling people around the world, for your own societies and struggles there, and therefore you will see this 2 days that you have spent here as a training camp, training you to be ambassadors. So that is the first thing that I would like you to just take away from here. The second thing is about the meaning of solidarity, because it has come up in different ways, in different forms, but solidarity is about, first and foremost, struggling at home, whatever that may be, wherever that may be, and then saying, okay, we are engaged in this, others are engaged in their own struggles, how can we bring these two things together? It's like different streams. If they come together, it becomes a river, it becomes an ocean. That is the concept of solidarity, which is actually very, very different from the kind of it is a kind of I'm just trying to think of a word here. This is like solidarity, the neoliberal version of solidarity, for want of a better word, is actually don't do anything at home. You think about people out there somewhere, you know, you go and do something in Africa, something in Asia, something in Latin America, because we in Europe, we are fine, everything is fine here, and that is the kind of internationalism or globalism that is being promoted. But what we have seen in the last 2 days is a very different kind of concept, and the difference perhaps between globalism and solidarity is that we struggle at home because our struggle at home is part of a larger struggle everywhere else. And it is only through that process that we can actually empathize. You would have seen in the last 2 days, we were able to actually empathize with what is going on in Rojava because all of us could relate to it. So when I hear them speak, I hear Tamil people's voices. And that is why I'm able to appreciate what you are trying to say. So, and likewise, we saw all of you took away something because it meant something to you, because it spoke to your own contexts as well. So it is in that. And then, of course, the question of emptying out of the meaning of democracy. And I think people everywhere are looking for answers because this hasn't worked. We have tried, all the national liberation movements tried to get state power, they all became states, and then of course the white sahibs were replaced with the brown sahibs, and it really didn't make much of a big change. And therefore people are asking for answers. And I think therefore the question is, to engage with that answer. Not to just say, oh, this is, Rojava is right, Rojava is wrong. But to engage with it, even if you have reservations, even if you have engaged, staying engaged with that process is what is going to actually make all of our efforts really more worthwhile and grow and flower, really. Because too often, those of us who are engaged in political work, social work, we like to talk to people who speak the same language, who are from the same parties as us, who think like us, feel like us, talk like us. But our challenge is to go away and talk to people who don't think like us, who don't really believe in everything we believe in. And that is how both our ideas can progress, as well as the other struggles can progress. And I'm sure, Salih, you agree with this thing of being engaged with various kinds of groups and so on. I then just want to thank all of you for your attention, for your patience, to the contributors for your very engaging contributions, to the organizers for this amazing 2 days, and I hope organizations like Public Art Norway will continue to fund this kind of embassies in the future as well as now. So, and so that we can, be here and learn and take away and change the world perhaps. Yeah. So on that note, thank you very much.